Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this Committee of the Whole meeting of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores and welcome everybody to the Council Chambers this evening. We're very glad that you're here. Second item on the agenda is disclosures of pecuniary interest and nature thereof. I'll ask any member if they have any pecuniary interest they'd like to declare at this time. Seeing none, of course, you can declare one any time if you need to. Next is additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda. We don't have any of those. We have no open forum. So that takes us on to item 5, delegations. And we don't have any formal delegations this evening, but what we do have is some very special guests here in the council chambers this evening. We have been very fortunate in Saugeen Shores to have an outstanding hockey season, and some of the folks who are responsible for that outstanding hockey season are here with us tonight. We have our 2019 Royal Canadian Legion PWB team, and we have a certificate here, and I'll just read it. That's the best way to explain why they're here. On behalf of the town of Saugeen Shores, in recognition of outstanding achievement for having won the Ontario Minor Hockey Association PWB All-Ontario Championship. So congratulations, guys. We have a certificate and a pin up here to give you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand up and I'm going to call your name. And when I call your name, come on up and we'll give you a certificate. And the deputy mayor is going to help me out. He's going to give you each a pin, and I want to thank the Deputy Mayor, too, for helping to arrange having the PWBs here with us tonight. So come on up, get your certificate, get your pin, stay up here, because we're going to take a picture at the end, okay? So here we go. Okay. Nice to have a good news story to start our meeting with. So we'll move on now to item 7, report of municipal officers and committees, and 7.3, infrastructure and development. And we have a staff report on a subdivision agreement with Lord Elgin Estates Developments Limited and the Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. This subdivision agreement is our standard agreement. It is for the vacant lands located west of Highland Street. They have been approved for residential development and will see the creation of 48 single detached dwelling lots, as well as the extension of Normanton Street and Devonshire Road. Drainage, walkway blocks, parkland block, and a trail block are also included.
Okay, sorry, Mike. There we go. Okay, so we have a recommendation, and we can take any questions. It's been recommended that council pass a bylaw to authorize the subdivision agreement with Lord Elgin Estates Development Limited for Phase 4 of the Summerside subdivision. Questions or comments from members? Being none, all in favor? That's carried. All right, and that moves us on to 7.4, Community Services, Parks and Recreation, and we have 2 staff reports, and the first one is Pumpkin Fest lease agreement for the Port Elgin Flea Market, and the Director of Community Services.
Thank you. As Council is aware, the Port Elgin Tourist Association no longer is operating, and therefore the Port Elgin Flea Market does not have an owner. The Port Elgin Pumpkin Fest Association has requested the operations for a 1-year basis of the Port Elgin Flea Market, and this agreement tonight reflects that. They will also contribute $5,000 towards beach improvements at the Port Elgin Main Beach.
So that moves us then on to the second staff report, which is a market study results and a presentation by Leisure Plan International Incorporated, but we'll turn it over to the Director of Community Services to start.
Thank you. Yes, this evening I'd like to introduce John Stevenson as well as Norma Draper. They're from Leisure Plan International. Staff has been working with Leisure Plan since about spring of last year in developing a market study for a recreation facility in Saugeen Shores. Staff, a number of us met with Leisure Plan last week to dissect and get a clear understanding of the plan, and we've invited Mr. Stevenson here this evening to outline and to articulate the information provided in this plan. So this evening I'd like to welcome Mr. Stevenson to the podium to answer some questions and certainly to present the findings.
It's a little bit of background about us. This type of work that we did for you is our specialty. We've done over 180 different market studies that examine the similar types of issues that we examined for you. And we've done more than 50 aquatic studies, specifically in Ontario. We've been involved in a number of different partnership negotiations with municipalities, educational institutions, healthcare organizations, and organizations like the YMCA. And recently, in the last 2 years, we've done a number of similar studies, most recently in South Huron, your neighbor, as well as in Winnipeg, Greater Napanee, Belleville, Walpole Island, and in Cobourg. And the reason for me referencing this is a number of the way we do things and the way we analyze things is based on this experience. It's sort of the bread and butter of our consulting business. And I guess the most important part for you to understand in terms of a departure is that I look at our role as minimizing the risk to any of our clients, whether it's a municipality or the YMCA. And the way we minimize that risk is to study things in a thorough way and to make sure any of our analysis can be substantiated and documented. And certainly, as a consultant, you can understand we don't really have the opportunity to get it wrong. I mean, we have to be right. And so the 180 projects that we've done are an indication that we've got it right. over the years. We're not here, and we never take the approach that we're here to sell something other than to make sure that the research that's done is the best research that can be done for the budget that you have allocated for this type of work. It also means, based on our experience, that we have some very specific assumptions about how the best way to do this work is, based on our experience. So in terms of the methodology, how we do the work, we have to select the approach that gives us quantitative data, numbers, so that we can take that and talk about potential demand and extrapolate it to the population as a whole. And that means that we have the approach is the telephone survey of a randomly selected, statistically valid, and representative sample of the population. The next thing we have to decide is the population that we're going to study. Ideally, you would study both genders and all the age groups, since age and gender influence potential participation. However, it's very expensive to do that based on the number of age groups, because each age group you have to do a statistically valid sample of them. So when you have a limited research budget, you select the age groups that are the most important to the financial viability of the facility, and that's the adults 20 to 64. And that's because they pay the freight in terms of the membership fee. So we conducted the research on the basis to analyze the results on gender and two age groups, 20 to 39 years of age and 40 to 64. And then to determine how many people we have to survey, we take into consideration statistical parameters associated with confidence level, which means that what confidence do we have that the results of the survey can be extrapolated to the population. So in this case, it was 95% confident that if you repeated the survey 19 times out of 20, the results would fall within the margin of error of the research. Margin of error is basically a statistical premise that says if you conducted the research over and over and over again, what would be the range that the numbers would fall within, all things being equal. So for this research, we had a 5% margin of error for total respondents, and for based on age group and gender, it was a 7% margin of error. And that margin of error is why you see a range of numbers when we do the projections of demand. The last thing is statistically significant means that although a number can look like it's larger, like 51% can look like it's larger than 50%, statistically it has to be larger than the margin of error to be statistically significant difference. And I know that's kind of like crazy talk, but that's the rules of statistics. So sometimes you'll see in a report we say the difference isn't statistically significant. That means that the statistical value is not greater than the margin of error of the research. Okay. And now the clicker is not working. So we'll try. There we go. So the survey research methodology, we apply the confidence level, margin of error, and that tells us how many completed surveys we need to obtain. And it's broken down to the age groups and the gender. So you can see that 412 completed questionnaires were required based on analyzing the results for age and gender. And 367 were required for the analysis of total respondents. So we obtained the 412 to do the analysis based on age, group, and gender, and then those 412 are weighted to do the analysis based on total respondents, if that makes sense. These all guarantee the statistical validity of the results, which allow us to extrapolate to the population as a whole with confidence to say that this is the estimated or projected demand that will occur. I probably hit the wrong button. Okay. So there were a series of question areas. The question areas are ones that we have developed based on our experience. They're selected specifically because they inform our analysis. So there might have been other questions you thought might be important to ask, but these were the most important ones for our analysis of the results. We also have to limit the number of questions we ask because we have 10 minutes to do the survey. And any longer, then you lose the respondents or they stop answering accurately. Okay? So we looked at a number of themes that help us understand what the potential market is for the types of activities and services that might be offered, as well as the factors that may influence potential demand in the future. So that's participation in programs and activities, opinions about participating in those, whether they're member currently at a health and fitness facility or the main reason why they're not, their level of awareness of the YMCA, and then their likelihood of purchasing either an adult membership or a family membership at the proposed facility in general, and then specifically based on a series of fees that were tested for both type of membership. We also looked at their preferred method to access the facility, whether it was through adult or family membership, the perceived convenience of the two locations that were tested, what was important to the decision to purchase a membership, and their level of interest in participating. So at a very specific point, we were able to analyze the results and come up with what the potential total demand would be among those age groups for the different types of membership based on the fees that we were analyzing. And they were expressed as whether they were very likely or somewhat likely to purchase a membership. Of note, the most important factors to the decision to purchase a membership were the provision of an indoor pool as part of a facility and the provision of indoor walking and running track as part of the facility. We then take the results and we interpret them to allow us to make the projection of potential demand. It's a three-step process. The first step is to take the survey results. The second step is to extrapolate those results to the population that we studied, the age groups, and then we apply capture rates based on the survey results and our experience to come up with an estimation of the total demand. So the population in 2016 of the age group that we studied was 7,790. So the potential market for adult membership we express as a primary market segment and a secondary market segment based on their likelihood of purchasing a membership. And then we do the three-step process. We had the result of the survey expressed as a range. We extrapolate that to the population as a whole. We then apply a capture rate. What percentage of that total number might we actually capture at the facility? And that allows us to make the projection of the number of adult memberships among the primary market segment. And we do exactly the same process for the secondary market segment. Secondary market segment being the somewhat likelies. Survey results applied to the population, a capture rate, gives us an estimate as to the number of adult memberships. You combine the primary and secondary, and that gives you a total number. Same thing for family memberships, a primary and a secondary market segment, based on whether they were very likely or somewhat likely. And then we go through this three steps as well. And the adult and family membership categories are discrete. There's no overlap between the people. Okay, and secondary market segment for family membership, again, three steps, so we have a projection. And that gives us a total number of family memberships. Not family members, but family memberships. And that allows us to do the projection of the total market based on our projections and our recommended capture rates of the facility. And it's 2,310 to 3,030 memberships. There were some other considerations and observations. Facility location didn't have a significant impact on demand, but the location of the plex was the preferred location. The size of the adult population in the market area does have an implication for the way that the facility is managed and operated, because the nature of these types of businesses, there's a fair degree of turnover in membership. So a group like the YMCA, which specializes in a membership experience, is pretty critical to the success and viability of the provision of this type of service. The secondary market that we looked at is relatively small currently in terms of the number of people. It may grow in the future as you have population growth, but we're just looking at existing population. And that emphasizes the need for a good membership service management and operation. The other note is that the aging condition of the existing pool may have suppressed demand, that people have become disconnected from the demand for these types of services. There will be an impact on existing health and fitness facilities and providers in town, but it's mainly going to be among the ones that are marginal service providers at the current time. Remembering that the main reason people are purchasing a membership is the pool and the combination of services that are going to be offered for all family members, which is distinct from the other types of services in town. And that's the quick synopsis.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm sure there'll be questions from members of the committee, so we'll start with Councillor Smith.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Like many of the residents in Saugeen Shores, March 6th started off like any regular day, except that I was waiting by my computer at 6 a.m. to register my 5- and 7-year-old for swimming lessons. And I actually, this evening before coming here, I was at the pool participating in swimming lessons, or watching my children. You mentioned in your presentation that the existing condition of the pool may have a negative impact on the demand. However, it's my understanding, and through the statistics that I've found, which albeit may be a bit dated, suffice to say that the capacity for Ontario swimming lessons are around 60%, and I believe we're currently at around 85%. So I'm just curious if you want to comment on the likelihood of the negative impact.
So what we find sometimes is when you have a municipality that doesn't have a pool, the demand for aquatic services is typically higher than in municipalities that have a pool. So the fact that you have a pool and aquatic programming may have diminished that kind of sense of large significant demand. There's significant demand, but for the activities, there may be a disconnect between residents who feel that the services that are offered, and we're talking about adults, not children, right? That maybe the programs that are offered are not meeting their needs or interests, or they're taking it for granted, that we've had it here forever, and they're the same things that always have been offered. This is us kind of taking the results of the survey, comparing it to what we would typically see, and trying to say, is there something a bit unique by your situation? And that's why we made that comment.
To follow up through you, Mr. Mayor, can you validate, is that an average? Are we anticipating an 85% capacity rate? In your experience, is that higher than the average municipality in terms of participation in swimming lessons?
So participation in swim lessons is dependent on a whole bunch of different things. Price, when they're offered, what type of program, whether you're Red Cross or not Red Cross. So saying whether there's an average, there is no average. But you should be looking at maximizing participation in any way that you can, right? And again, we were looking specifically at the adult market, not children, youth, and teens, okay? And the adult market for swim lessons is very different than for children, youth, and teens.
Okay, further questions from members? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and if you bear with me, I do have 4 or 5 questions. That's okay. Thanks for your presentation, John. It's good seeing you again. It's been a lot of years back when it was an own sound, actually. John, one of the burning questions I heard during the surveying process was the 65 and over market. The town of Saugeen Shores is in the top 25 percentile in the province of Ontario for average household income. I think it's around 120,000. We have Bruce Power here. We have lots of good pensions, and people moving from cities with selling homes at great high prices, and building here. We see, and we're in the top 25 percentile. Seniors in the latest Census Canada numbers indicate that provincial average 1 in 6 with seniors 65 years of age and over. We're 1 in 4. 1 in 4. And so 25% of our population by 2025 will be 65 and over. And so it just really concerned me and a fair number of members of the community who received the phone call, gave their age, and they were excluded. So my question of you, my first question, is why were they excluded? I have to have it answered publicly when the media are here because people like to have the question answered by you. Why were they excluded? And secondly, if they were included, the 65 plus, with your 150 studies, 50 pool studies, what would have that done to the number? Can you answer that question first? That's the first question.
Okay, so they were excluded because there was a limited research budget, and we had to focus the research on the age groups that made the biggest difference to the financial viability of the facility. And that was, in our experience, the adult group. So, in an ideal world, with unlimited funds, we would have surveyed all the age groups, but we didn't have that luxury. So we had to make a choice. Second point is, what impact will it have? Well, definitely the senior age, older adults, will represent a secondary market group. So the numbers you see, they would be in addition. So any demand you got from the senior market would make those projections larger. Okay. So from my perspective, because I could only study a certain number of groups, I couldn't give up the adults, right? In terms of the analysis point. Because I know that they drive the financial viability of that facility.
Okay. Thanks, John. Okay. And I think it's a little tip. I'll just throw this in, and then I'll move on from it. But I think that, we asked to see the survey questions, which we were not allowed to see until right at the end stages. But I think if we had seen them, I as a member of council, may have said to the rest of council, made a recommendation that an extra 5 or 10 grand. I'm not using that 10 grand lightly. The numbers, I mean, it is money, but I think I probably would have supported a few extra dollars to do the 65 plus market. However, we didn't. So that's been done. The second question, John, I have is that am I reading correctly on page 22 of the report that 82.8% of those surveyed are very likely or somewhat likely to purchase an adult membership? And secondly, on the same page, I think I'm reading it correctly, that of the 82.8%, 71% are not currently a member of a fitness facility.
So this is before we introduce price. Yep. So that number is, if you want to put it in the context, is huge. And it shows the level of interest in the activities as well as the facility. But you'll see if you go further on, yes, as you introduce price, the number
Comes down. Comes down.
which is typical. Right?
Understood.
But the level of interest is significant.
Okay. In your survey, John, I'm just wondering, Bruce Power recently announced a $13 billion announcement was made, which includes up to 10,000 employees, contract workers, coming and going over the next 20, 25 years. Was that a consideration in the survey result? Is that factored into the number? And secondly, are seasonal residents factored into the number?
Neither are factored in.
What does it mean then?
This is a market study of your existing residents, permanent residents. So if you have population growth, to the extent that the people who move into town reflect the people who currently live here, demand would increase. Same thing with the seasonal. It should be additional demand for the facility and participation in the programs.
So when we take a look at the question 4, 2,310 to 3,030 memberships, not factoring in the Bruce Power influence, contract workers, seasonal population, that number is not likely to go down. It's almost like, I say gravy, but is it likely to increase that number?
Yes. So if you take a business viability perspective, you're looking at your core market, and you should be kind of planning the operation based on that core market. And then you kind of bring in these considerations of secondary markets, which are the cushion, which is the thing that helps you feel like you're minimizing the risk to all the parties.
Mr. Mayor, just a couple of quick ones. You talk about 24% of those surveyed have memberships outside of the community. It seems to be a significant number, although there's only 400, I think it was 400 or 300. So what you're saying is that about 100 of those surveyed
go outside to purchase these type of activities.
Interesting number.
Yeah.
My question you answered on location, it didn't seem to be of that much importance.
Well, it doesn't make a big difference in terms of the potential demand. In some municipalities, you would see location influencing demand.
Okay.
Here, not so much. But what you do see is a preference for this location compared to the other location.
My last question, Mr. Mayor, if I could, to the Director of Community Services, Jane. So we've invested some $40,000, I believe, in this report, and I believe that for me, in a ways, it provides for me information to assist me with moving towards making a final decision, and whether it's a month or 2 or 3 or 6 months down the line, that the documentation, the support at a certain level seems to be well documented. I would think we'd be remiss if we did not get to the next step in the planning process, and that's a business plan, to see how this all shakes out in terms of if, and it's a big if still, we were to partner with the Family Y. What does it mean financially? Is it a break even with 2,310 to 3,030 members? And say you hit the maximum. Does it mean that it's a zero operating deficit? Is it a $100,000 contribution from the municipality? Is it $500,000 contribution from the municipality? I know you can't answer that this evening. I get that. My question is, Jane, when do we get to that step, that point where a report comes back to this council to say, here are the next steps in terms of we're moving forward with a business plan, and in the business plan, here's what we want to find out now. What are the next steps?
So we as staff have certainly been discussing what the next steps will be, and part of our job will be to bring you that information, but we're looking at developing a report for you probably within the next council. It talks about the links, what that means for us today and tomorrow. We're also closely looking at the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. Granted, there hasn't been a tremendous amount of information right now when it comes to recreation, but we're actively pursuing that fund as well. And then we'll bring that information to you for you to decide your next steps, whether we partner with the
Okay,
right one.
but the part I'd like to zero in on here a little bit, Jane, if I could, Mr. Mayor again, is speaking to the Y Town of Saugeen Shores Partnership. And I've spoken to the Town of Petrolia, I've spoken to Godry, spoken to Owen Sound, done some research on operating costs. In your report, is the next step, one of the next steps to move forward, will your recommendation be, or do you know what the recommendation is going to be in terms of, are we moving forward with the next step, which means if we were to partner with the Family Y, what does this mean to the municipality of the Town of Saugeen Shores from an operating deficit surplus standpoint? Is that part of the next step of business plan?
Yes, certainly through you, we'll be comprising that information for you to review. We have not started those next steps. This evening, this was merely a matter of receiving this information.
I understand. I just wonder what the next steps were with the Family Y, if there's a next step. So if I'm not clear on your answer, Jane. Sorry.
The CAO.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to clarify a little bit what Jane said. Not clarify, because she said exactly right, but just to reinforce what she said. Our plan is, at our next council meeting, we are going to bring a report specific to the Legacy Fund and how the infrastructure funding, the timing of both of those to start to put some context around if council decides to go forward, when would be the sweet spot financially in terms of when we would have money available to do that, and when the infrastructure funding opportunities align. That is scheduled to come at our next meeting. I'm looking at our Director of Corporate Services, and she's nodding her head. Yes, and then shortly after that, so in May, Jane will bring a more fulsome report on next steps, working with our colleagues at the YMCA. Gail is here today. We want to map those two things out and get council's approval to take those next steps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Further questions? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. John, thank you for your presentation and your report. I had a question about contacting people, and I'm just wondering, especially for the younger group, the 20 to 40-something group, did you contact people through their cell phones or landlines?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. We have to purchase a list that's only for this purpose, and it includes both cellular numbers as well as landlines.
Oh, that's good.
Right.
And the other question I had was, when you spoke to the person, did you ask where they lived?
Yes.
Okay.
They were qualified whether they lived in the municipality. Not where they lived in the municipality, but whether they lived in the municipality and whether they'd be living here in 2 years' time.
Okay. And so if they said, I live in Southampton, that would be qualified as being part of the survey, for instance?
They were asked if they lived in Saugeen Shores. Okay. So they had to answer whether they lived in Saugeen Shores or not. We weren't concerned with where they lived within the municipality because we weren't able to analyze the results based on where they lived.
Okay. I just, my reason for asking is that I had a couple of people who indicated that they lived in, it could be the misunderstanding on either part, of the person who's doing the survey or the person who's giving the survey. Mm-hmm. But a couple of people saying, I live in Southampton, and then the person saying, oh, well, we need somebody who lives in Saugeen Shores. Right. So, yeah.
I don't think, because the surveyors were told the different small communities that made up Saugeen Shores. Mm-hmm. But
it could be on the other side, too.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But it could have happened.
Yeah.
But if it would have happened in a significant number, we would have been aware of it because the surveyors would have notified us. But also the fact is that numbers were being selected randomly as well. And sometimes you find that the numbers fall outside of the municipality. Or with cell phones, sometimes people have moved on. So you have to have a question that captures as much as you can, very simply. Right? Again, we got 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Further questions from members? We'll get the Vice Deputy Mayor. You may as well finish up, Vice Deputy Mayor, and then we'll move on.
In my scribble, it's one way I can understand any of it, but the one I did miss, John, in your capture rates, this is an interesting number. When you talk about 2,310 memberships to 3,030, could you explain to me again the 50%?
Yeah.
Is that number actually could potentially? Are you using a safe number? Is that what we're doing here?
So, like I said, we're conservative, but we also reflect an understanding of the business of providing aquatic services and fitness services and what influences those markets. So based on 40 years of experience as well as all the academic research that's done, we know that based on survey methodology, you have 100% of a market identified. We know that you're not going to capture 100% of that market. So what percentage of the 100% would be reasonable to capture? And so you see our recommended capture rates based on our experience, i.e. conservative estimates, but also based on the responses to the survey. So if the responses to the survey were out of the normal range that we see, those capture rates could have gone up or could have gone down. Okay? But the capture rates are really would give us the confidence to stand in front of you to say, this is the best research you can do. If we had gone with the 100%, I think it would be misleading, and I think it would expose you to an undue amount of risk in terms of basing a business plan on that. So typically, you take those numbers and base a business plan on those capture rates, and you can do sensitivity analysis and change the capture rates and see what happens.
Okay, thanks, Sean. And the 2310 3030 number for a community this size, past experiences, 50-some studies in aquatics, is that a healthy number?
It's a healthy number.
Councilor Schreier.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. And maybe a question for the Director of Community Services or the CAO. I guess I had a few questions as well with next steps. So by the sounds of it, we'll be receiving a few staff reports that will come forward with regards to funding and potential next steps for a business case then with the YMCA. So are we then at the point right now where it's YMCA or nothing?
I think at this stage, we're receiving this report with regard to the market study. The market study is really showing us what the market is. It doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a YMCA study necessarily. It shows us what the market is. It's available for a pool with certain facilities. But I think those decisions have to be made going forward. We have a memorandum of understanding with the YMCA right now, which we're working through. But before we can formalize or before we can move forward with any agreement, a more formal agreement will be required, and that will require further decision making by both the YMCA and by the town of Saugeen Shores.
Right, and to follow up almost with that then, would be if it's found that it's either not a good fit for the YMCA or the municipality, then we would go back to the table to discuss what our options are for Saugeen Shores to stay in aquatics.
These are discussions that we're going to have down the road based on recommendations from our staff and ongoing discussions with the YMCA. I don't know if the CAO or the director want to make further comment to that, or does that cover it?
Well, I think you've articulated.
CAO.
Yeah, I'll just add, so the mayor is exactly right, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Our experience, though, in the experience of the market is partnerships, is the road to success. Our consultant can speak about his experience working with other municipalities, and when we had the meeting prior a week or so ago, he listed numerous municipalities that are partnering with the YMCA. Before we signed the memorandum of understanding with the Y, we looked at other potential options. There aren't many. Boys and Girls Clubs, as an example, municipally run programs, I think, are becoming rarer in municipalities of our size, but the consultant can certainly speak to that.
So definitely the trend in terms of the provision of a municipal aquatic service is to do so through a partnership or a collaboration or some kind of service agreement with an organization such as the Y. That's a trend that's across the continent. In the States, there are private sector operators that sometimes come in the market. There aren't any in Ontario that do that type of business. And so the best partner in Ontario for quasi-municipal level of service has been the YMCA. And there's lots of examples of successful partnerships and collaborations, but they're all different depending on the nature of the municipality and the facility and the kind of deal that you want to do. So it can really be a Saugeen Shores tailored agreement. We just did a study for Greater Napanee that was specifically about aquatics and the demand for a municipal aquatic facility. And then we were hired to come back to do the business case and the feasibility study. We recommended to do a partnership because the municipality could not have delivered the service with a significant financial impact to taxpayers. And that impact was 4 times what it would have been based on a YMCA operation model. So there's reasons why these things work. And there's lots of examples, and there's lots of examples where the partnership has been at the very initial stages of consideration. So that's also helpful. For me, as your advisor or counsel, you've heard us talk about a membership-based management operation and how critical that is to the success of the venture, right? I'm kind of wearing the hat as if it's a business that we want to be sustainable over the long term. That really means you have to have management and operational staff that are based on customer service in a membership environment. And that's the Y model of service delivery. That's not typically a municipal model of service delivery.
And just one follow-up then through you. Very familiar with the YMCA operations and very supportive of the operations in the municipalities that they fit in, and great examples, Owen Sound, Goderich, and whatnot. I think that if we are proceeding to the next step, what I'm looking forward to is looking at all of the amenities that go with that, because I do believe that there are established programs and services and businesses within the community that I feel would either be affected by this, but also that those considerations have to be taken into account of the services that are already provided within Saugeen Shores as well. So thank you.
Yeah, and important to be clear, this document provides us just another piece of information that both we and the Y need to make decisions on one way or the other. So there's more to come and more discussions on all of those things to come as we head down the road of making decisions on this. Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Thanks, John. I have 2 questions, one to do with the methodology of the survey and one to do with the determination of the impact on other existing facilities in our community. So the first one, it does a great picture of the demographics and across the spread of our community. I wonder if consideration or much consideration was given to the geographics of where we live. If you have a community like Owen Sound, they've got about 300 degrees of catchment area, or Hanover, one of our neighboring municipalities, has 360 degrees of catchment area, where we, being a shoreline community, really have only 180 degrees catchment area. So was there determination given into how outlying communities, the fact that we only have one side of them, less than another community? Was that?
No.
No.
So the market you see documented is only within the municipal boundaries. It takes into, no consideration is given to anybody who lives, the market that may be beyond your municipal boundaries.
That's the gravy portion too, is it?
Well, I don't, gravy, or that's also the cushion. But
Cushion, okay.
if I was, if I'm running a business, I'm making the decision based on the resident market, because it's going to be here 12 months a year. And I want to be able to be viable 12 months a year from now, forever, right?
Half of them are here 12 months a year anyway.
Well, you know what I mean? It's,
Yeah.
it's sort of,
That's
and all those other things give me a greater degree of confidence and comfort level that the risk is smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. It's being minimized because I'm not making the business case based on that market materializing. Right? There are municipalities where the secondary market, the market that's outside the boundaries, is critical to making the facility work. And in those situations, we typically say, do not proceed with a municipal facility. Proceed with a regional facility, but not a municipal facility.
Okay, my second question then, the section in here about impacts on other existing fitness facilities, and you talk about the number of people who responded who were currently members of other facilities and how many of them might switch over to a new facility. Was consideration given to their potential to move over if the new facility had nothing but aquatics, i.e. a splash pool and a lane pool and maybe a walking track, but didn't go the extra mile? And I know it's part of the WISE business plan to have the fitness facility integral to the facility, the fitness portion of it. But there was no determination that to say if it was just two pools and a walking track, then some of those people might not be tempted to come over because they're used to what they're getting at the other facilities, which none of them currently provide an aquatics component.
But also you're looking at the age groups you're providing a service. So we're looking at family membership, which is adults and other age groups, which typically fitness centers don't serve. But in that case, you're talking about a completely different facility because you're talking about an aquatic facility with no other sources of revenue. So your potential deficit just went to $800,000 a year, which, because we just did this for Napanee, we just looked at the aquatic facility, and in a municipal operation where you're charging like $1 for free swim and $25 or $30 for learn to swim programs, the deficit is just unrealistic. Yeah, well, there's no way it pays for itself. Hence, there's very few, if none, single-purpose aquatic facilities being developed in North America. They just don't build them anymore because you need to maximize the potential sources of revenue, and you do that by offering the widest range of programs. And fitness is very complementary to aquatics and can help offset the cost of providing aquatics. So that's the reason it's a multi-purpose facility. But if you wanted to just build an aquatic facility, we would have done a different study. But before doing that study, I would have said, don't do it. Don't waste your money hiring us, because I'll tell you right now, it's not going to be financially viable. Unless there's something incredibly unique here, like somebody who's going to donate money to provide the service. So if all municipalities in Ontario have stopped developing single-purpose facilities, there's got to be some wisdom in that.
Further questions from members? The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, John, thank you for your time. Data is a very interesting thing. I can't imagine how much time you had to pour through this to come up with your results. But I want to go back to the last thing you said. Could you just clarify for me? You said for the town to run its own service, it's not viable?
I don't think moving forward in a new facility, running a municipal pool in 2020 and to provide the kind of services that we identified a demand for, I don't think it would be financially viable. It would mean a level of subsidization that I would, as a consultant, say is too high, and you should really be looking at alternative service delivery to minimize the impact to taxpayers.
So if it was to run through something like the Y, where does that subsidization come from?
Well, the subsidization that's required in a Y operation, although I shouldn't be speaking on their behalf, is partly because of their efficiency in terms of this is their business, this is the service they provide, and also, depending on the municipality, you you kind of make up the difference. So say, for instance, there's been municipalities, Quinte started out with a $300,000 subsidy. They provide, the municipality built the facility, the Y came in to operate it, there was a $300,000 backstop financing, annual financing provided by the municipality, and that was subject to the financial performance of operations. Started out at $300,000, it's now nothing. It's now zero. Because the facility operated by the Y is now at a break-even position.
Councilor, may I ask the question regarding the impact on existing services in town? And originally in your report you said that there would be marginal service interruption. Can you expand on that?
I think the services that you're proposing to provide and the nature of the membership programs is going to be different or distinct from the majority of the private sector providers in town. There will be an impact because some of their members are definitely going to move and become a member at this facility. To the extent that they're a well-performing organization and to the extent that they're satisfying their membership, they should be able to either keep their members or maybe a member will choose to have membership at both locations. But the business, the core business and the focus is we're serving a different population group, we're serving all ages, and we're including aquatics and fitness in an integrated service.
So, and as Vice Deputy Mayor Maya said earlier, some of the questions that were asked didn't quite go as far as I want to, and I understand economics of the questions and time that you had restricted that. Now, when you're talking about a pool, you're just talking about pool and not a recreation facility that we've been talking about that gets bandied back and forth. And I don't think we even are talking on the same terms. When we say pool and rec facility, we're talking pool with just a walking track, which isn't what some people are saying. Is it a pool with another complete recreation facility beside it that contains basketball courts, gymnasium courts, walking track facility, workout rooms? In the survey, and I've read this 3 times and I'm still trying to find the answer. The purpose of the survey was to determine if the Y was viable in our town, correct?
That was one of the purposes of the study.
Yeah. Can you tell me what page I'd find it? What was the number? Was it a yes or no?
If it hadn't been viable, in our opinion, we would have said that. But it would have had to have been dramatically not viable because the real point of making it viable is the size of the facility that we're going to talk about and the negotiation of an agreement between the municipality and the Y. So I have had municipalities that have said we are prepared to subsidize the full $500,000 a year. And we've had other municipalities that say our limit is $200,000. So the business case changes based on the specifics of the deal between the municipality and the Y. So we're not in a position, it would be wrong of us, it would be unprofessional for us to comment on the nature of that deal, because there is no deal.
Going forward then, I guess you're saying that the survey shows that we are going to move forward, but there isn't a definitive yes or no.
So from the way I would advise you to kind of interpret the results is overwhelming level of interest in terms of the concept. A significant level of demand in terms of the concept, why service provision, and the prices that we tested, and the location we tested, and the types of services we tested. Significant level of demand.
That clarifies it a little better.
The CAO wanted to make a comment. CAO?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. So, the Deputy Mayor, you're anticipating, I think, the work that is going to come. The consultant has spoken about the market study and then the business plan, and I think those are steps that need to happen. When we met briefly, and certainly the director and I have spoken about it, and representatives from the Y, is about the scale of the facility. We could build 2 50-meter pools, and that's not reasonable. We could build a 6-lane pool, and that might be reasonable. So based on the numbers that we've got, a business plan will be developed, and this will be part of our report back saying these are the next steps. The scale of the facility will determine whether the membership, projected membership, can support a facility.
Thank you, CEO. But I wasn't asking about that. What I'm trying to figure out is, does this report, and I struggle with this, does this report lead us to be able to go on to that next step of, do we go to the business plan, or are we just moving to the business plan? Well, because now it's time, we've done this and we've wasted enough time, we just move on to that.
I think that this market study gives us the information that we need in order to, if we choose to proceed to a business plan. It gives us a data set that we require in order to show whether, or to show what kind of facility we could construct and how the market would respond to that. It gives us that data that we would need to develop a business plan, to then have a discussion between us and the YMCA to create a potential deal. So it's just, as I said earlier, it's just another piece of data that we need to make a business case.
If I could just add to that, to answer your question. If the demand had not been as significant as it was, you would have had a conclusion from Leisure Plan that said the demand does not justify moving to the next step.
But is that demand for a pool, or is that the
It's
demand?
the demand for what was tested is the pool and the fitness components. That's what we tested.
That's what we're asking for.
We didn't test just a pool.
Yeah, so we're looking at the pool and the fitness, but
Correct.
not by who's providing it. So there is a demand for that.
Based on a membership type of operation.
Yes.
And based on the monthly fees that are identified in the report.
But not by who runs it. It's just that the demand is there. We want these facilities.
Correct.
Thank you.
Further questions from members? I think we've had, do you have something, Councillor Smith? Yep.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just a quick question. You mentioned that this gives us a data set to progress to the next steps, but I just want to clarify, I believe it was mentioned to us earlier, perhaps the director can answer this, that the telephone survey was one of several communication mechanisms that would be used to garner feedback from the public, particularly the interest of those individuals in the older adult age bracket that were not considered. Can you provide some advice on what additional mechanisms are being considered?
Certainly. At the end of December, we also had a forum that we hosted during the daytime because we wanted to absolutely attract some of those older adults, some of them that use our facilities and some of them out of pure interest. We have those results, and we'll bring those forward as part of our next steps as well for Council to review.
I think we've had a good discussion on this, and we appreciate, John, your giving us your time and coming in to talk about this. I think that you give that number, that 2,310 to 3,030 potential memberships. It's a healthy number based on a very conservative report. I mean, we've heard through all the questions that have been raised today, all of the sort of different subsets of people who, could come in additionally to that as you say, a confidence buffer in terms of the business plan, the business case for operating this facility. I think that it's a report that shows that we have some strong potential support in Saugeen Shores for a new rec facility with the features and amenities that you surveyed on. And so I think that on that basis, it gives us a strong that information we need to move forward in terms of the operating side of this whole discussion. And it's very important, I think, just as we conclude the discussion here, to remember that and to reiterate that there is a capital side to this discussion, which we have not discussed today, which is separate from this. The YMCA operates pool facilities; it does not build them, and municipalities have to do that, whether you have a YMCA or not. If you're going to have a pool, you got to build it, and the taxpayer is going to have to foot the bill for that. We have studies showing that that cost is somewhere in the $15 to $20 million range. And maybe more, considering we're adding amenities that haven't been considered before in any of the studies we've done. We've done quite a few, but we've never designed a building that had a fitness facility or some of these other features. So it's going to be more than that. So we've heard from the director that we're going to get back some reports about next steps. And part of those discussions are going to be on one track, how do we continue the discussion about operating partnerships and agreements? And on the other track, how do we make progress on the capital side of this discussion? And we have some good plans in place that we're going to hear about around the Legacy Fund to get us there on that capital discussion. And also in terms of working with other levels of government, in terms of lobbying and those things for grant funding. So there's much more to discuss, but I also want to point out that we have time to have these discussions. We do not have the $20+ million in pocket today, so it's going to take us time to collect that funding. And so during that period, while we build up those resources, we have time to continue to talk with the YMCA, to talk about other partnership opportunities that we may have, to talk, even as has been pointed out, about proceeding on our own. We have time to sort this out, and we can keep collecting data and keep refining our approach to this so that we do it right and in the best interest of the entire municipality. So I feel confident that we have done well to this point, and I'm looking forward to getting those reports and the next steps. And I really want to once again thank you, John, and to the Leisure Plan group for all of your work in helping us out with this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that moves us then on to this 7.6 communications, and first we have one communication for Committee of the Whole action, which is a request for funding from the Saugeen Mobility and Regional Transit Service. I just have to, my computer's now turned itself off completely, so I'm going to have to start even from further behind. But anyway, we have the request. It's for $40,000 and change. They're looking for funding to support from the gas tax. We are going to, the town of Saugeen Shores is going to be receiving additional gas tax funding as a result of the federal budget, assuming that budget receives royal assent. And at that stage, we should receive a doubling in our gas tax funding. And so that, I think, is what has triggered this request for $43,175.86 in order to support capital investments in transit vehicles from Saugeen Mobility Regional Transit. So there's a request, and we'll open up the discussion from members, and we'll start with the Vice Deputy Mayor, who is our member on Saugeen Mobility Regional Transit.
If I could make a recommendation or suggestion at least, and how Council receives this, but today, recently, I guess it was today or yesterday, SMART, through our the town of Hanover handles all the finances, by the way, for SMART transit services. And recently just received a letter that $563,037, so $563,000 is available for capital infrastructure fund, capital funding for replacement of vehicles. And that just happened. And you're aware of this, Mr. Mayor. And I know Council Met, who's attended the last meeting, on behalf, thank you, David, and I appreciate it. And I know Cheryl, Councilor Grace, has attended a couple of meetings, and in the 2 or 3, 4 meetings in the last couple of years as well. Thank you, Cheryl, for doing that. I think what I'd like to recommend here, Mr. Mayor, is to defer this to staff, to come back with a report based on this new information on this $563,000. There is a clause in here that to gain access to this funding, the SMART must provide $204,000 of its, quote, in its own money, in the words of the manager. And so, we are one of 8 partnering municipalities that someone has to pay. I mean, they come up with the funds to pay for the replacement of the vehicles. This has come up a few times over the last 2 or 3 years, and why there's not a reserve. Well, there was a reserve at one point; it's been depleted, and why we have not been contributing to that reserve account. We should have been, and so we should not let this happen again. Obviously, where you get to the point where you've got $500,000-$600,000 of vehicles need to be replaced in 1 year. So this is good funding. I would suggest this council send it back to staff using all the information we've just gotten, received in the last few days from SMART and from the province and the feds, to come back with the report to make a recommendation where we may proceed. Should we defer it to the 2020 budget? should we delve into the gas tax funds and send our portion of funds to help with that? 204,000 has to be raised, or how do we handle it? So I think staff would best to help with that report, Mr. Mayor.
So we can consider that a motion to refer to staff? Is there a seconder for the motion to refer, seconded by the Deputy Mayor? Is there further discussion on the motion to refer?
Mr. Mayor, if I could just comment, the July 1st deadline, I would hope that the motion to defer with the report would happen. Good.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be up to the administration to determine how they can respond based on available time, but
Sure.
this reference would put it in their hands to deal with. I would express a concern with the process, given the fact that 6 weeks ago, it was only 6 weeks ago, we passed the operating budget. This council fully funded the smart request of $113,000 at that time. Since then, a gas tax funding was announced by the federal government, and within a few days, we get a request from Smart for capital dollars that weren't identified in their 2019 budget. This is not a way I'm comfortable with doing business. I understand the need from Smart, and certainly I'll certainly support the motion to refer and to hear from our administration. There is a large amount of demand on the gas tax funding within the municipality, generally targeted at road work. We have a large infrastructure deficit, and we need to think carefully about how we spend those dollars, including the additional dollars the feds have promised. I do believe that the Smart Board of Directors and management need to consider carefully how they are planning for the future of the operation of this transit service. A transit service that does not plan for the replacement of its fleet has an issue. So I think that, once again, I support the motion to refer. I think that the Smart Board needs to consider this as an approach which cannot be the approach in future, because it's a problematic approach in terms of how we plan for a successful transit system. So, are there further discussions, questions, or comments? The Vice Deputy Mayor?
Mr. Mayor, to follow up what you said, and I agree with you, in my 2 years on the board, the question has come up about depleting reserves for fleet management, and you're right. It's got to be fixed. It's got to be fixed, and there are 8 partner municipalities that got to help fix it. And there's an opportunity for a $560,000 grant, with Smart coming up $204,000 of that. So I hear you, and I agree with you. I understand, and we need to do a better job at the board level, the management level with Smart. But I hope when the staff report comes back, there's recognition of this $563,000 that we need to come up with 204 somewhere. Otherwise, I mean, I'd hate to want to send back $563,000 to the government. But I think for the most part, we're on the same wavelength.
Nope, understood. So you have the motion to refer. If there's nothing further, I'll ask all in favor of the motion. That's carried. So there are a number of items, 15 items there, communications and petitions for Committee of the Whole information. Does anybody have any comments they want to make on any of those? Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, there are 2 items on there that I would like to make comment on and perhaps ask clarification on, if it's available, that is. The first one is the Coulson Cannabis formal notice, sale for medical purposes. So I understand that this is a company that has purchased or secured in some way a property over on the Dahl Side Road, concession 10 Dahl Side Road, which was formerly a cattle farm operation. And I was wondering if in fact that property, being an agricultural property, is zoned properly for what is being considered here. Is this does it fall under a home-based business, or because I mean, let's face it, cattle barns are not typically designed for human habitation or factory settings. They're not built the same way. They don't have the sprinkler systems and ventilation systems that you might require for a factory, or especially something producing medical grade stuff. So I wonder if there's zoning and if consideration has been given to the appropriate application there.
I just maybe Could the clerk just, could you make just a comment on what our involvement is in any of this, or do we have any role? Is it just here for our information because they're required to inform us and that's the extent of it? Or is there any regulatory role?
You are correct, Mr. Mayor, and through you, the town of Saugeen Shores does not have any role in the regulatory part of this, so this is just formally notification to the town of Saugeen Shores that this process is taking place. With respect to the zoning and the conversion of a barn to the proposed use, that would have to go through the building department, and I believe it is deemed to be in an agriculture use, in an agriculture zone.
Yeah, so any process that's required would take place at the building stage, but in terms of this, I think what you can count on is the regulatory controls are in place, and they will be exercised in accordance with the zoning bylaw.
But just for clarification, did the clerk say that this type of operation would be an agricultural operation?
I think that would be up to the building department to determine whether it matches the existing zoning. I don't think we would want to make any comments with regard to any of it at this point.
All right.
In this place.
All right, then my second question, maybe it's not a question so much as a comment on the correspondence regarding the Aaron Eldersley correspondence with regards to Burgoyne. And I know that I have had some discussions with staff regarding what our official position is on this. I would just like to say that we have people who are part of Saugeen Ward who live on the west side of that road, and that at some point in time we have to come to terms with the situation that these people are in, and they're facing what I think is unreasonable request by the provincial ministry on what has been an existing system. Certainly the state of their system and the quality of the water that's being delivered to those homes is very poor, and by no means, the people, in conversation with some of the people who live there, it's not considered to be potable water by any way, shape, or form, and even through the use of filters and softeners and things like that, I don't believe anybody actually consumes the water. It's more just for washing and flushing and those types of things, and I don't think that the ministry is taking that into consideration necessarily. They're applying the standard of any other municipally supplied water system, and I think at some point in time we should, at the very least, petition to the Minister of Environment, thank you, that perhaps some qualifying and some leniency and some special provision might be considered in a situation like this.
I think as you'll see in the letters, there's a letter in response to the municipality of Aaron Eldersley from the Director of Infrastructure and Development, stating her willingness and the administration's willingness to meet and discuss the situation and its effect on our residents at a staff level. I think that the discussions are ongoing, and I think the appropriate response will come out of those discussions that are taking place at the staff level. So I think, whatever transpires there is going to, we're going to be informed about, and hopefully, we want to make sure that we get that. We work with the municipality of Aaron Eldersley to get that situation rectified. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just want to comment on number 10, and you've already brought that up. It's great to see that the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities has found some extra money to divvy out to the communities of Canada, and as you said earlier, we have some projects that we could probably put this towards that would help a great deal. I'd also like to comment on number 9, and just to say that our Vice Deputy Mayor, when he created this letter that's gone out to our province, the need for money and infrastructure programs and capital funding projects is not just ours alone, but I think he started a groundswell, and the government should see this, and hopefully it will come forward and pay off in huge dividends.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my question is for Director of Infrastructure and Development, and it's referring to the number 11, the Source Protection Committee minutes. So in those minutes, it talked about the fact that Brockton and Hanover, together with Collaboration Plastics Associations and Bruce Power, will soon be ordering a styrofoam densifier to convert styrofoam products into saleable items, and this will help with recycling styrofoam. So I remember, Amanda, maybe a year ago or a year and a half ago, you told us that all of our styrofoam is going into the landfill because we don't have a market for it. Do you see any potential, or have you thought about the possibility we might be able to either send or sell some of our styrofoam to these folks?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it's not something that I've considered at this time. This, of course, was the first that I've heard of this purchasing of the styrofoam. My knowledge to date is that the styrofoam can only be recycled so many times, and then that's why the market was gone. It is something that we can look into to see if they're accepting styrofoam from other places, but it may just be for their own.
Anything further on the petitions for information? Vice Deputy Mayor.
2 items, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your comments, Deputy Mayor. Appreciate. And just in relation to that, Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering, the early word coming out from Parks and Recreation Ontario and AMO is that, what I'm hearing anyways, is that funding applications for recreation and green infrastructure could be as soon as late summer or fall. And I'm just wondering about this question around, I know we're too early for the pool, obviously, lots of decisions need to be made there still. But the outdoor sports complex, we're in the $1.5 million this year we budgeted, I think, and the land purchase doesn't qualify. But would staff be considering if that envelope of funding opens up late summer? I guess I'm looking at the Director of Community Services, but Jane, if there's an announcement in April, May, or June that envelope opens up, is opening up this late summer, fall, is it quite conceivable that we could be submitting an application, our first application in 10 years? It's not been around for outdoor sports complex, possibly?
Certainly. Absolutely, we'll be taking a look at it. Jeopardize future possible funding as well, but it's something we'll definitely investigate, working with our Treasury Department to see what the best route is, and getting some professional.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the second point, Mr. Mayor, if I can, and I think I'm thanking the right person, Lisa, in the aging, the Council on Aging report. I think, Lisa, you were pretty involved with that whole process. And okay, and I just want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, to Jane and to Lisa, for that report. I think it was well done, and although I didn't get to one of the public meetings, I wanted to be there. I didn't, unfortunately. But I guess one of the comments I had, in addition to thanking you for the great work, maybe perhaps to the CAO, David, in the report, it talks about a lot of things. It talks about housing needs, and it talks about transportation, and a whole lot of other good things that are required in this community to make things a little more comfortable for our aging population. They talk about tiny homes, and I know, Mr. CAO, you've talked about tiny homes, I think, at one of our council meetings, or maybe you and I discussed in your office one day, I'm not sure. But could I respectfully ask, Mr. Mayor, for the CAO staff to come back? The province of Ontario have just announced recently, somewhere I read, where municipalities will have a little more say, a little more room for rezoning lands for properties titled tiny homes. I'm not sure they've specifically said tiny homes, but that we have more flexibility. And I guess what I'm asking is that with the housing needs that have increased over the years in Saugeen Shores and more affordable housing, tiny homes, I was looking at them when I was on vacation there this winter. Down in Florida, they're really big and been approved, and they're popping up around the province, in the states. I'm not sure much around the province, but tiny homes, those 400, 500, 600, 700 square feet, may be something that might be very attractive to a segment of our population. So I'm just wondering, Mr. Mayor, if our CAO staff could come back to this council at some point in the next quarter or the third quarter, talking about where we may head with properties, with introducing tiny homes into our community. I just want to throw that idea out there and ask if staff could potentially come back and report to talk about it.
I think the best thing, we are still planning, I hope, to do an official plan review in 2019. So I think that the best place to have those discussions in the context of a lot of other discussions about housing is going to be there, and hopefully we'll get into that discussion at that time. And at that point, the administration will be in a position to actually engage us in that discussion and provide us the information we need and have it worked into their work plan to work it. So I think would be the best approach.
Oh, don't lose the thought. I will be raising that question then during the update in the official plan.
Yeah, good. Anything further on the petitions? No? Okay. So, and the other, I just wanted to note that St. Joseph's Catholic School video that we don't really have the technology to show it. I wanted to do that, but we wanted to do it justice too. So it's in there, and I hope you've all seen it. It's pretty good stuff. So that moves us then on to 9, report of department heads, and an information report on our bronze designation for Share the Road and the Director of Community Services.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes on the agenda this evening, really to recognize Lisa, and under the direction of Lisa, Saugeen Shores has been designated a bronze designation as a bicycle-friendly community under the Share the Road Cycling Coalition. This is massive, and we apply for a lot of grants and opportunities that arise. I have to admit that this is the biggest application we've ever had to apply for as far as depth. It took several weeks, if not months, to gather the information in order to become a bronze status. We're also proud to announce we're the first community in Bruce County to be designated. And when you look at a map, we're actually the first community all along the Lake Huron shoreline. So for those of you who aren't cyclists, hopefully you will become cyclists shortly. And this is a great economic spin-off for us to be designated, and also that we're on the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail. I was with Lisa and the mayor in Toronto on Monday evening. It was the buzz, it was the talk. A lot of MPPs in the building, in the room, recognizing us and congratulating us. So certainly be proud of our bronze designation. And don't ask us when we're applying for silver, because we're going to rest on this right now and relish in the moment. But certainly as we work towards the transportation master plan, components of that will certainly be included as active transportation and how we can leverage to the next level. So I thank Lisa for her hard work in this, and I thank Council for believing in us and allowing us to move forward in the application.
All right, so we'll take some questions, and I guess you want a picture afterwards.
Absolutely.
With this. All right, so questions from members first. We'll go to the Deputy Mayor first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and just want to expand on what our director said. I've been espousing the virtues of sport tourism along the Lake Huron shoreline for the last 3.5 years. We're the first, and I believe it's just the first of many opportunities that we have to go there. But before I go any further, I'd like to take this time to say a few words as we commemorate this momentous achievement. I believe it's appropriate to give a little background as to how we got here and mention those people that were involved. A little over 4 years ago, after a couple meetings, a deputation, and numerous correspondence about cycling in the province, I brought forward a motion asking that Council look at making Saugeen Shores a bicycle-friendly community. That motion was quickly adopted. In fact, it was Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt who gave the committee its name, the Recreation Active Transportation Committee. The committee was comprised of our Director of Community Services, former Deputy Mayor Diane Huber, Jane Kramer, Gord Lamont, Jim Rackley, Pat Gibbons, Karina Serta, and myself. Our first duty was to look at our mandate and decide a suitable plan for accomplishing this. Our mandate for this newly formed committee was broad and encompassed the promotion of healthy lifestyles via the town's parks, trails, programs, and facilities. Our first task for the members was to submit their list of goals, which would be added to the list identified in the committee mandate. The first phase in working towards the bicycle-friendly designation was led by Jessica Linthorne. We looked at the Market Street corridor and the 10th concession linkage. Jessica soon moved to her economic development post and was replaced by Lisa Billings. After a short time, we thought we had enough information gathered to submit a request for the bike-friendly designation. Unfortunately, our first attempt, we were not successful. We were given the honorable mention status. But that wouldn't stop this committee. A second group of community volunteers came on board to help us with Phase 2. They consisted of former Deputy Mayor Huber, Jim Rackley, Jeff Myatt, Rebecca Smith, Larry Van Wormer, and myself. This group looked at what we had done for the first submission, and with the help of our staff, and in particular particular, Lisa Billings, we devised a plan to make another submission. The biggest part of all this was that we hosted a cycle tourism development workshop in April of 2017, and then brought in the community stakeholders when we hosted a Becoming Bicycle Friendly session on May 10th of that year. The rest, they say, is history, and is what brings us here today, to celebrate our bronze designation as a bicycle-friendly community. With the success of the Grand Fondo last year, the number of cyclists coming to Saugeen Shores will only increase. We are no longer the best-kept secret in Ontario. We need to be leaders and innovators in the cycling world. If I've said it once, I'll say it again. If you build it, they will come. Now, Mr. Mayor, a bronze is nice, but silver and gold are much better. With that in mind, I look forward to the next phase as we work to achieve the silver designation. I am told it takes about 2 years to achieve this designation. Therefore, I'm offering my services and willing to put my name forward right now to begin to work with the new committee that will continue to work with council, staff, and our community representatives as soon as possible to establish our priorities and work towards that silver designation. Thank you.
Thank you. The Vice Deputy Mayor?
Well, Mr. Mayor, it was really, Deputy Mayor kind of stole a little bit of my thunder. I was really intended to thank you, Deputy Mayor, for I remember sitting right on that chair over there. You were beside me 4 years ago, and we talked about the Active Transportation Committee. We talked about bike-friendly community, and so I just want to thank you too for all your good work you did on it. It's been a passion of yours, and the dream's been fulfilled, the plan's been fulfilled, and so in addition to Lisa and Jane and Jessica and all the rest of the staff, I just wanted to pass it on to you too, as from the Active Transportation Committee. I know it's been a real passion, and we got there, so thanks to you too.
Further comments? I think that's the important thing, and congratulations to the department and to the committee members that were mentioned. And but it's important to recognize, it's very important to recognize that what this is really a recognition of is the commitment that we have made to this effort. It isn't a recognition of the fact that we have achieved, clearly it's bronze, so we haven't achieved the gold standard, but it isn't even intended, I think, to recognize that we're at the end of a road, right? It's intended to demonstrate that we in Saugeen Shores, more than, at this point anyway, any other community along Lake Shore, Lake Huron, is prioritizing being bicycle friendly. And it's going to continue to be a priority, and we're going to continue to cycle down that path and succeed at that. So, before I talk myself into a deeper hole, why don't we get up? We get a picture with this sign as the director would like. Eh? Okay, so that's the end of the agenda. I guess quickly before adjournment, we can go around the table and do announcements by members. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I've got two for anybody that is available tomorrow and has nothing better to do. The first ever Western Regional Archery Tournament is going to be held at the Southampton Coliseum beginning at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. There's 191 archers coming from Midwestern Ontario. Our staff did a fantastic job of setting it up. The gentleman who comes with the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters has never seen something quite like this as he came into the Coliseum today. Our staff had already designed the holders to hold up the netting. It's all set up. If you get a chance, come down and see it. And the second part is we celebrated one team winning. Our PWB boys won the All-Ontario. And just yesterday we had a second All-Ontario championship in Saugeen Shores. Our Bantam girls won the girls provincial championship in Toronto yesterday, and we'll be celebrating them in 2 weeks on the 25th.
Good. Vice Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, tomorrow I'll be attending on your behalf, actually, Grey Moose Health Forum. You know, sounds a full-day workshop, and lots of family physicians there, health planners, and you know, we'll be talking about physician supply, patient needs in Grey Moose counties, and at the end of the day, there'll be some recommendations come forth, and what we can do as municipality, physician recruitment teams. Councillor Smith's on that committee. Whereas, you know, why are doctors coming here? Why are they not coming here? If they're leaving, why did they leave? How can we sustain a good, healthy workforce, whether it be nurse practitioners, doctors? I imagine there'll be lots of good discussion tomorrow. So I'll come back at the next meeting or submit a report to all of council. Just report back on how that discussion goes tomorrow. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Schreider.
Yes, thank you. Me and Councillor Carr sit on the Saugeen Rail Trail committee. So last Tuesday night we had our meeting. They're really doing a lot of things to increase their membership. So there's a big membership drive coming up. So I encourage everybody who are not members to perhaps join the Saugeen Rail Trail Association. They're also hosting 2 volunteer trail cleanups. So they're asking for volunteers. April 13th, the meeting will start at River Street Trailhead, noon till 2 o'clock, and then April 27th, they'll start at the Memorial Gardens in Southampton, and again at noon till 2 o'clock. So if you're available to please attend and help out. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yes, as tradition would hold, the Rotary Club is hosting their annual Hall of Fame induction ceremony on May 9th. In 2019, we will see 4 inductees, 2 community builders, and 2 athletes. We have so much to celebrate in this community in terms of community investment and athletic endeavors, as was mentioned a couple of times this evening. I just wanted to congratulate these inductees and their families and the contributions they've made to the community. Tickets for the ceremony are available as of Thursday, so please support that initiative by the Rotary Club.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, as you know, I'm the chair of Bruce Area Solid Waste Recycling, and on Tuesday we had a tragedy in the municipality when one of our drivers, an Art Patterson from up around Allensford area, was killed while driving one of our recycling trucks down around Brockton. He lost control of his vehicle and was ejected from it and then crushed by it. So I think that's a real moment of sadness for us. That company does do all of our waste pickup and all the recycling for the region. Our thoughts go out to his family, of course, who recently moved to the area from up around the North Bay area. Anyway, I thought that it was really important to mention that at this time.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. And I think the thoughts of everybody in Saugeen Shores go to the family of that driver and to all the workers at Bruce Area Solid Waste Recycling, who I know were all affected by that tragic incident. Thanks for raising that. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last Monday, I attended the Southampton Arts Centre AGM, and then on Thursday, their Feast for the Eyes celebration, where they honor a lot of some new and emerging artists and some returning artists, but there was a wonderful display, huge turnout of people, and it was a lovely event. So if you haven't gotten in to see the exhibit so far for the Feast for the Eyes, drop in and see it. There's a lot of impressive work, and it really shows how arts and culture is thriving in our community.
Absolutely. Councillor Carr. Councillor Mayette. And I have nothing, so we'll take a motion to adjourn. Move the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Schreider. All in favor? We're adjourned. We will reconvene at 8:25.